On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, in a city where everyone rushed and no one truly looked at each other, the cafe on the corner of Willow Street was overflowing. Every table was taken, every chair occupied, every bar stool claimed by laptops, coffee cups, and half-finished conversations. People guarded their seats like they were islands in a stormy sea. Except for him. Ethan Cole sat alone at a small table by the fogged-up window, his worn leather notebook open, a half-drunk coffee cooling beside it. He was nothing special to the passing eye. No tailored suit, no designer watch, just a guy in a simple jacket with ink stains on his fingers and tired kindness in his eyes. He worked 2 jobs, dreamed too big for his bank account, and believed, stubbornly, that small acts of decency still mattered in a world that moved too fast. That was when she walked in. Her name was Olivia Hayes. To the world, at least the parts of it that care about tech acquisitions and investor reports, she was a quiet legend. A single mother who had built a multi-million-dollar company during nap times and midnight hours, raising her son alone while negotiating contracts from a tiny apartment kitchen. Recently, a buyout had made her wealth official. On paper, she was a millionaire. In her heart, she was still the girl who'd counted coins to buy groceries. But today, no one in that cafe knew any of that. She wore old jeans, a simple hoodie, no makeup. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun that looked more exhausted than styled. She carried a scuffed backpack instead of a designer purse. To everyone in that room, she looked like just another tired woman trying to escape the rain. Olivia scanned the crowded cafe, searching desperately for a place to sit. Her phone buzzed relentlessly in her pocket with messages from lawyers, investors, and a nanny updating her about her son's homework. She ignored all of it for a moment. All she wanted was a hot coffee and 10 minutes to breathe. "Sorry, we're full," the barista said, already moving on to the next order. Olivia turned in a slow circle. Every table was packed. At one, a man spread his things over 2 chairs to avoid sharing. At another, a woman glared at anyone who came too close, her handbag occupying the seat beside her like a territorial marker. Then she saw him. Ethan looked up from his notebook, just as Olivia's eyes met his. She hesitated. He noticed the way her shoulders drooped slightly, the way she clutched her cup a little too tightly, the way she seemed to be holding herself together by pure will. "Hey," he said, raising his voice just enough to be heard. "You can sit here if you'd like." He moved his notebook aside, freeing the chair across from him. No hesitation, no suspicion, just simple, effortless kindness. Olivia blinked, surprised. Most people didn't offer space without being asked. Most people didn't look twice at someone who looked as worn down as she did. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yeah," he said with an easy smile. "Coffee is better when you're not standing in a corner, pretending you're comfortable." She laughed. A small, startled sound she hadn't heard from herself in a while. Then she sat down, not knowing that this stranger, this man who had just given up half his table, had absolutely no idea he'd just invited a disguised multimillionaire single mother into his world. Before this story goes any further, there's something important. Where in the world are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. And make sure you stay with this video until the very end, because what happens between these two at this crowded cafe will completely change how you think about kindness, judgment, and what it really means to be rich. For a while, they just shared the table in a comfortable, fragile silence. Outside, the rain softened from hard streaks to a fine, steady mist that coated the streetlights in a hazy glow. Inside, the cafe's noise rose and fell in waves, orders being called, chairs scraping, milk steamers hissing like tired engines. At their little island by the window, time seemed to slow down. Olivia took another sip of her coffee and let the warmth settle in her chest. It had been a long time since she'd sat anywhere without checking her email every 30 seconds, without mentally sorting through invoices, deadlines, and school schedules. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket, vibrating against a leg like a small, insistent reminder of the life waiting for her outside this brief pause. She ignored it. "You're a brave person," Ethan said suddenly, eyes still on the window. She frowned slightly. "Brave? I'm just sitting at a table." He shook his head. "You walked into a packed cafe alone, looking like you were already on your last ounce of energy, and still decided to search for a seat instead of giving up. Most people would have just gone to the drive-thru and added it to their list of bad days. You came in anyway. That's brave. Nobody's ever called me brave for buying coffee before, she said, a hint of amusement threading through her voice. I don't think it's about the coffee, he replied. She studied him more closely. His profile was calm, but there were small tells, tightness at the corner of his mouth, a tiny crease between his brows, that betrayed how tired he really was. His jacket was clean, but frayed at the cuffs. One elbow of his shirt showed the faintest thinning in the fabric. There was a quiet neatness to him, the kind that comes from someone who has very little but takes care of what he has. Her mind flicked back to this morning, when her accountant had read a number out loud that had made the room tilt for a second. The final transfer from the acquisition had gone through. The total in her account now began with a number she had once associated only with lottery winners and headlines about overnight success. She remembered sitting there frozen, while the lawyer smiled and said, "Congratulations, Ms. Hayes. You've done it." Had she? Because here, in this cafe, across from a stranger in a worn jacket, she didn't feel like someone who had done it. She felt like someone who was still catching her breath after a very long run. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it flashed on the table as she shifted her hand, and the screen lit up with a preview of a message. "We should discuss allocation of your new assets." Ethan glanced at the screen by accident, then politely looked away as quickly as he had seen it. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to peek." "It's fine," she said, flipping the phone face down. "It's just work." "Important work," he observed. Most people don't get messages with that many zeros attached. She tensed. For a moment, she thought he'd guessed everything in a single glance. Then she realized he'd only seen the word assets and the length of the message thread, not her name in a headline, not the articles circulating in business circles, not the bank app with more digits than she knew what to do with. "I help with finances," she said vaguely. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole story. He nodded, buying it without pressing. "Must be nice," he said lightly. "You know, thinking about numbers that aren't just red." The joke was casual, but something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. As if on cue, his phone lit up on the table. This time, the screen was angled toward her. A text popped up from a contact labeled Landlord App 3B. "Ethan, we can't wait another month. If full payment isn't in by Friday, we'll have to start the process. I'm sorry." He tapped the screen quickly, turning it over before she could read more, but it was too late. The words were already burned into her mind. "Can't wait, full payment, start the process." She pretended she hadn't seen it. He pretended she didn't know. That was a silent agreement. "You live close by?" she asked instead. "Close enough to walk if I don't mind soaking my shoes," he said. "Far enough that it doesn't feel like I'm living in a coffee grinder." "And you work?" "Too much," he said with a half smile. "Day job at a logistics company. Night shifts at a warehouse 3 times a week. The dream planning squeeze in between whenever my brain isn't mush." "And you still come here to write?" she asked. "If I don't," he said, "then my life is just work, sleep, worry, repeat. The cafe breaks a loop." She swallowed. How many loops had she lived through? Work, baby code, cry, repeat. There had been days when she'd eaten cereal for dinner, so her son could have the last of the canned soup. Days when the only thing that kept her moving was a half-wild hope that all the invisible effort might someday add up to something others could see. "Sounds expensive," she said quietly. "All those coffees." He smiled again, softer this time. "Sometimes I just buy the cheapest thing and stretch it out. One coffee is cheaper than what it costs to fall apart." The honesty hit her harder than she expected. Here she was, a woman who now had more money than she could spend in years, listening to a man who considered cafe coffee a measured investment against collapse. They lived on opposite sides of an invisible line drawn by numbers in a count. But sitting here, staring at the same rain and breathing the same steam, the line felt thinner than the world liked to pretend. "You're not curious?" he asked suddenly. "About what?" "About me," he said. "Most people who share a table either overshare their life story or slap headphones on and pretend I'm part of the furniture. I am curious. she said. I just try not to interrogate people who are kind to me. He chuckled. Fair. But if you're wondering, I'm not secretly rich. I don't have a trust fund, and I definitely didn't pick this table hoping to network. She knew that already. She'd seen enough expensive shoes and bored faces in investor lounges to recognize the opposite when it sat right across from her. And you? He asked, tilting his head. Anything you want me to know? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. What could she say? I'm a single mother who used to count coins at the grocery store register. I signed a deal that gave me more money than I know how to hold. I walked into this cafe trying to remember how to just be a person. Just that I'm grateful, she said instead, that you made space when you didn't have to. His eyes softened. The world doesn't give people like us space, he said. We take it where we can, or we share it. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like people like her meant single, exhausted, always one step from disaster. Sitting across from him, it felt like it meant something else. People who understood struggle. People who chose kindness anyway. People who, whether rich or broke, still believed in making room at a crowded table. The rain eventually slowed to a soft drizzle, turning the cafe windows into watercolor paintings of the street outside. Inside, the crowd thinned just enough that conversations became distinct instead of one steady roar. The espresso machine hissed. Chairs shifted. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke. Olivia was in the middle of asking Ethan another question about his after-school center idea when a sharp voice cut diagonally across the room. Can someone do something about that kid? The sound sliced through the cozy atmosphere. Every head turned, including theirs. Near the center of the cafe, a young woman sat with a toddler in a high chair. The little boy was red-faced, tears clinging to his lashes as he fussed and whimpered. Crayons rolled across the table. A napkin, half shredded, was scattered around like paper snow. The mother's shoulders were bowed, her hair falling in a loose, unintentional curtain as she murmured, Please, sweetheart, just a few more minutes, okay? Please. At the next table, a man in an expensive suit, tie loosened, watch gleaming, shook his head in irritation. This is ridiculous, he said loudly, clearly intending to be overheard. Some people really shouldn't bring children into public if they can't control them. The young mother flinched as if struck. Color flushed up her neck. She reached for her son's hand, but he jerked away, knocking over his juice box. Liquid spread slowly across the table, dripping onto the floor. The man rolled his eyes dramatically. Unbelievable, he muttered. I'm trying to work. The barista glanced at the scene, clearly torn. Intervene and risk escalating things, or say nothing and let the mother absorb the humiliation alone. Olivia's heart dropped straight through her chest. She remembered that feeling, the burning shame of being told without words that your child's existence was an inconvenience. The nights when her son had cried in public and strangers had stared as if motherhood was a crime she committed in front of them. Her hand tightened around her cup before she could decide whether to say something. Ethan pushed his chair back and stood up. He didn't sigh or roll his eyes or mutter under his breath. He just moved, like he'd already made up his mind long before this moment ever happened. Where you going? Olivia asked quietly. 2 tables over, he said. Apparently the world needed a reminder. He walked toward the commotion with an easy, unhurried stride. He didn't loom or puff himself up. He simply positioned himself at a respectful distance between the complaining man and the young mother, like a buffer. Everything okay here? He asked, voice calm but carrying enough to be heard clearly. The businessman huffed. No, actually everything is not okay. I'm trying to get work done, and some of us can't focus with all the screaming. The toddler had quieted now, staring up at the unfamiliar man with wide, wet eyes. The young mother's hands trembled as she dabbed at the spilled juice with napkins that fell apart in her fingers. I'm sorry, she said quickly, voice cracking. He's just tired. I'm trying. You're fine, Ethan said gently, directing the words to her first. You're doing fine. He turned slightly toward the man in the suit. Look, I get it. Noise is frustrating. But this is a cafe, not a private office. Kids exist. So do tired moms. Life doesn't stop so you can send emails in peace. The man scoffed. She should at least have some control. It's called parenting. Olivia watched, breath caught, as the young mother's eyes glossed over. She folded in on herself, drawing the toddler closer, as if she could shrink them both out of sight. Ethan's expression didn't harden, but something in it settled. You know, he said, it's funny how people who aren't currently juggling a child, a drink, and a meltdown are always the experts on parenting. A couple people at nearby tables looked up, interest sharpening. He continued, tone still calm but with a steel thread running through it. She didn't come in here to ruin your afternoon. She came here to survive hers. You have a laptop, headphones, and the option to leave. She has a crying kid, probably a long day, and nowhere else to go right now. Maybe give her a break. The man opened his mouth to fire back, but the barista, sensing an opportunity, stepped in with a professional smile. Sir, if you'd like a quieter spot, we have a seat open by the back wall. Less traffic there. The businessman glanced around and realized the room was watching, not loudly, not with pointed fingers, but eyes were on him, silently weighing his next move. He muttered something under his breath, snapped his laptop closed, and moved to the back without another word. Ethan turned back to the young mother. His entire demeanor softened. Hey, he said quietly, you're okay. Kids cry. Anyone who's forgotten that isn't as grown up as they think. She let out a shaky breath, a small, embarrassed laugh escaping. I'm so sorry, she said again. I didn't mean to cause trouble. He missed his nap and... You don't have to explain your baby to anybody, Ethan said. You don't owe this place silence. You paid for your coffee. You bought your time. He picked up a few of the crumpled napkins and juice-drenched straws, tossing them into the trash. Do you need anything? More napkins? Another juice box? 5 minutes to breathe while someone makes silly faces at him. The toddler sniffled, watching Ethan with curiosity. Ethan wiggled his eyebrows and crossed his eyes. The boy stared, then giggled. There it is, Ethan said, smiling. Proof that you're doing something right. He still laughs. The young mother pressed her lips together, emotions tugging at her face. Thank you, she whispered. People usually just stare. Let them stare, Ethan replied. Most of them wouldn't last an hour in your day. He gave the boy a little wave, then walked back to his table like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. No grand exit. No expectation of applause. Olivia watched him sit down, her chest tight, her eyes stinging in a way she hadn't anticipated when she walked into a crowded cafe just looking for somewhere to sit. You do that often? She asked when he returned. Do what? He replied, taking a sip of his now lukewarm coffee. Jump in front of strangers like a human shield, she said. He shrugged. Only when they're getting hit with something they don't deserve. Her voice was very quiet when she said, You know she'll remember that for the rest of her life, right? So will her kid, he said. Maybe not as a clear memory, but as a feeling that in a room full of people who were annoyed by his existence, at least one person didn't make his mother feel small. She looked at him like she was seeing something sacred. A kind of wealth that had nothing to do with numbers and everything to do with who a person chose to be when nobody owed them anything. And for the first time, Olivia wondered if meeting Ethan wasn't an accident at all, but an interruption she desperately needed. Back at the table, the air felt different. The cafe hadn't changed. Same chalkboard menu, same scuffed floor, same soft indie music murmuring from the speakers. But something in how Olivia saw the room had shifted. The man who complained now sat alone at the back, hunched over his glowing screen. The picture of isolation. The young mother had relaxed slightly, her shoulders loosening, her son now quietly drawing wobbly shapes on a napkin. And across from Olivia sat a man who had just put his dignity on the line for someone he'd never see again, then come back like it was no big deal. You know, she said slowly, most people don't risk public awkwardness for strangers. He lifted a shoulder. Silence is a decision, too. I've stayed quiet before. Didn't like the mirror afterward. Her fingers traced the edge of her coffee cup. So, this after-school center, she said, tell me more about it. Not the polite version, the real one. He glanced at his notebook, then at her. as if weighing how much he revealed to someone he'd just met. Then he flipped the notebook around and slid it toward her. Pages were filled with messy, dense handwriting. Diagrams, budget estimates, ideas for programs, coding workshops, financial literacy, art labs, conflict resolution training, small business incubators for teens. Names and arrows connected concept in chaotic but thoughtful lines. "You weren't kidding," she murmured. "You've really thought this through." "That's the problem," he said dryly. "I've thought it through too much and funded it not at all." She scanned a page that broke down projected monthly costs. Rent, utilities, staff, equipment, snacks. The numbers were painfully modest. He hadn't imagined some glossy, corporate-branded center. He'd planned something lean, scrappy, and real. "This part here," she said, pointing to a line item for mentor stipends. "Why not use volunteers?" "Because consistency matters more than charity," he said. "Volunteers are great, but kids in unstable environments need adults who don't disappear when life gets busy. If you don't pay people even a little, you can't expect them to show up every week. I'd rather have 5 reliable mentors than 20 who flake." She looked up at him, surprised and impressed. "You've thought about sustainability." "I've watched too many good things burn out because they were built on guilt and goodwill instead of structure," he replied. "People get excited, pour themselves out, then realize they can't live on gratitude. It's not fair to them or the kids." Her chest tightened. She had built her company on late nights and guilt and goodwill. She knew exactly how quickly burnout devoured even the best intentions. "So why haven't you started?" she asked softly. "You clearly know what you're doing." He gave a humorless laugh. "Knowing what to do and having the means to do it are two very different realities." "Grants," she suggested. "Crowdfunding." "I've tried," he admitted. "Wrote 3 grant proposals. Got 1 rejection, 1 we regret to inform you, and 1 silence. As for crowdfunding," he scrubbed a hand over his face. "I made a page. Twice. Wrote everything out. Then deleted it both times." "Why?" she asked, genuinely confused. He hesitated, then said, "Because I don't want to be another voice shouting, 'Help me, help me,' into the void. Everyone's tired. Everyone's struggling. Who am I to ask strangers for money when they're trying to keep their own lives together?" She stared at him. "You're someone trying to build something that doesn't just help you. That matters." "Tell that to the internet," he said. "It's full of people who've learned not to care unless there's a catchy video or a tragedy attached." She thought of investor meetings, the way wealthy men in tailored suits asked her if her story could be packaged more dramatically, if her single mother angle could be leveraged for PR. She felt like a product, not a person. Now, hearing Ethan, she recognized that same reluctance in him. He didn't want to turn his heart into a marketing pitch. "You know," she said quietly, "a lot of people with money throw it at things that look good on paper. You're talking about something that looks good in people." He smiled faintly. "Unfortunately, living, breathing, changing lives infrastructure doesn't fit nicely into a pie chart." She flipped another page and saw a list of neighborhoods written in careful print. Some of them she recognized as the places she used to avoid walking through at night, places where she'd once lived. "Why these areas?" she asked. "That's where the kids are who never see anything different," he said. "They grow up thinking the only options are survival or spectacle. Either you scrape by quietly or you try to blow up on social media and hope it saves you. And you want to give them a third option," she said. "I want to give them the option I wish someone had given me," he replied. "A place to go after school that wasn't just go home and hope nothing bad happens. Somewhere to meet adults whose lives weren't defined by disappointment." Her throat felt tight again. She thought of her son, safe at home with a sitter. He had books, toys, a laptop, a full fridge. She'd fought like hell for that. But how many kids were sitting in dark apartments right now, scrolling through their phones, thinking the world had nothing waiting for them? "You talk like somebody who's seen the worst," she said. "I've seen enough," he answered. "Enough to know that if someone doesn't show up for these kids before the world does, the world will win, and the world is not kind." She looked down at the notebook, then back at him. Something settled inside her. Not a decision yet, but the shape of one. He didn't know it, but she had sat in rooms full of millionaires and billionaires who talked about impact while barely understanding the lives they claimed to want to help. Across from her now sat a man who understood those lives intimately, and all he lacked was a bridge. She realized with a quiet jolt that she might be that bridge, but for now, she stayed silent, letting the weight of his dream hang between them like a fragile, luminous thing. The conversation drifted, almost organically, toward territory she rarely let anyone enter. "So what about you?" Ethan asked gently. "You've heard me ramble about my half-baked nonprofit. What are you adjusting to exactly?" She stared at the swirl of foam clinging to the wall of her paper cup. For a moment, she considered giving him a polished version of her life. "I consult. I work in finance. It's complicated." The safe, vague phrases she perfected for people who didn't need to know more. Instead, she heard herself say, "I'm a single mom." The words came out more softly than she expected, but they landed with weight. Not pity weight. Truth weight. He nodded, not in surprise, but in understanding. "How old?" "7, she said, and even just saying the number softened her features. "His name is Noah." "Good name," Ethan said. "Strong. Biblical with a twist." She smiled. "He's everything," she said simply. "Too smart for his own good. Asks questions I don't know how to answer yet." "Like what?" he asked. "Like why some kids at his school have drivers and others take 3 buses," she said. "Why his friend Malik always wants to stay late at our place. Why I'm always tired. And what do you tell him?" Ethan asked. "As much of the truth as I can without handing him my anxiety," she replied. "I tell him that people start from different places, that it's not fair, but it's real, that our job is to be kind without letting people walk all over us." He smiled faintly. Sounds like he's had a good guide. "I'm trying," she said, voice barely above a whisper. She took a breath, then continued. "When he was born, I had nothing. No safety net. His father disappeared before I even saw the second line on the pregnancy test. I worked nights, studied on weekends, built my first app sitting on the bathroom floor while he slept in the tub because it was the only place with enough light that I could work without waking him." Ethan's eyes softened, a mix of admiration and quiet anger at a world that made that necessary. "That's intense," he said. "That's survival," she replied. "For a long time, my life was just stringing together small solutions and hoping they didn't all fall apart at once. Every month was a math problem. Rent, food, daycare, Wi-Fi for work. Something always gave, usually sleep." "And now?" he asked. She hesitated. "Now, technically things are better," she said. "On paper, I'm comfortable." The word felt foreign in her mouth. She didn't say rich. She didn't say secure. She certainly didn't say millionaire, even though that was objectively true. The label felt like a costume she hadn't earned, even if reality said otherwise. "But comfort doesn't erase memory," she continued. "I still flinch when I swipe my card at the grocery store, half expecting it to decline. I still stockpile coupons I don't need. I still wake up sometimes in a panic, thinking I forgot to pay something important." His gaze was steady. "That doesn't just switch off," he said. "No," she agreed. "It becomes part of your wiring. You can change your surroundings, but your brain takes longer to catch up." They sat for a moment in a shared, heavy silence, bound by different versions of the same war. "Can I ask you something?" he said gently. "Depends how dangerous it is," she replied. "Did you ever resent him?" Ethan asked. "Your son. In the hardest moments." She blinked, surprised by the honesty of the question. Most people only wanted the sanitized version of single motherhood, the inspirational poster, not the cracks. "Yes," she said after a beat. "Not him exactly, but the weight of what it meant to be his only everything. There were nights when he cried, and I want to cry too, but I couldn't because one of us had to be the adult." She swallowed. "There were times, holding him while the world felt like it was collapsing, when I thought, if I fail, it's not just me who falls. It's him too. And that pressure, it's heavy. It's heavy in ways no one prepares you for. And yet, Ethan said softly, "You're here." "He's 7. You kept going." "Stopping wasn't an option," she replied. "That's the thing about being a single parent. You don't get to collapse. You just leak a little at the edges and keep moving." A faint, pained smile crossed his face. "You sound like some of the moms I grew up around. The ones who didn't have time to fall apart." "You grew up in a single-parent home?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "My mom worked herself into the ground. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I used to think she was made of steel. Now I know she was just very good at pretending she wasn't breaking." She exhaled slowly. "I think a lot of us are very good at pretending." They looked at each other across the table. 2 people from different lives, connected by the invisible scars of grinding through years of not enough. "You know what's funny?" she said. "The more I've succeeded, the fewer people ask about those years. They just want to know how it feels to have made it." "What do you tell them?" he asked. "That I haven't," she answered. "Not in the way they mean. You don't make it out of certain seasons. You carry them with you. You just walk into new rooms and hope they don't show up on your face." He regarded her with new respect, a deeper layer than before. She felt oddly exposed, not because he knew her bank balance, but because he saw the truth beneath everything she carefully presented to the world. In that moment, if he had asked who she really was, she might have told him, but he didn't. He just said, "For what it's worth, you don't look like someone who's failing to me." And somehow, that mattered more than all the congratulatory emails sitting unopened on her phone. The lull in the cafe grew longer, like the calm between tides. People came and went, leaving behind empty cups and fragments of conversation. The young mother gathered her son and left with a small nod in Ethan's direction, gratitude shining silently in her eyes. At their table, the warmth between Olivia and Ethan settled into something both fragile and solid at the same time. Her phone buzzed again. This time she checked it. A message from her lawyer. "Board wants to know if you're joining the press call in the morning. Media is circling. We need to align on your talking points as the inspiring founder." She locked the phone without replying. "You okay?" Ethan asked. "Just people who wanted to act like someone I'm still trying to meet," she said. He chuckled softly. Relatable. Then his phone rang. The sound cut through their shared bubble. It wasn't a cheerful ringtone, just a flat, default tone, the sound of obligation. Ethan glanced at the screen, and his expression tightened. He hesitated, then muttered, "I should take this," and rose from his chair. She nodded, trying not to listen. But the cafe, though less crowded, wasn't loud enough to drown him out completely. His voice carried in clipped fragments as he stepped a few paces away, turning slightly to face the window. "Hey, yeah, I know. I didn't forget. I'm working on it. I understand Friday is the deadline." Olivia stared down at his notebook, at the carefully scribbled dreams that now looked heartbreakingly vulnerable. "I'm not avoiding you," he said quietly. There's only so much blood I can squeeze out a week, you know?" A pause. His shoulders dropped a fraction. "No, I don't have anyone who can help," he said. The words hit her harder than she expected. "No, I don't have anyone who can help." She closed her eyes briefly, memories rising like ghosts. The landlord who had threatened to change the locks if she was late, just one more time. The hospital billing department that had called twice a week over an emergency room visit sheet had to put on a credit card. The daycare center that had warned her they might not hold her son's spot if she fell behind again. The feeling of standing alone, always one step away from a disaster she didn't have a backup plan for. Ethan's voice dropped even lower. "I get it," he said. "I do. You have your job. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm doing the best I can. If I could conjure money out of air, trust me, I would." He listened, jaw clenched. Then, "Okay, I'll figure something out." He hung up slowly and stared out at the rain-streaked glass for a beat too long. Olivia forced her gaze away, giving him the illusion of privacy he obviously needed. She stared at the scratched surface of the table, her heart pounding in a strange, tight rhythm. When he returned, he tried on a smile that didn't fit quite as well as the ones before. "Sorry about that," he said, sitting down. "No apology needed," she replied softly. Everything okay? Define okay, he said, attempting a joke. She didn't laugh this time. You don't have to tell me, she added quickly, not wanting to push. But you also don't have to pretend. He exhaled slowly, the air leaving him like a slow leaking balloon. Landlord, he admitted. Rent's late. Again. This time, I'm out of extensions and sympathy. Is it just you? She asked gently. Me and my younger brother, he said. He's 18, finishing school. I told him he doesn't get to drop out just because life is complicated. So I pick up the extra hours, so he doesn't have to. She swallowed. That's a lot. It's fine, he said quickly. I'm fine. There was the lie she recognized from her own mouth. You know, she said carefully, fine is usually the word people use when everything is standing on a cliff and they're trying not to look down. He huffed a tired laugh. Maybe, he conceded. Look, I'm not special. A lot of people are juggling worse. I've got 2 jobs, an overdue bill, and a dream that makes no financial sense. That's not tragedy. That's Tuesday. Still heavy, she said. He shrugged. You get used to heavy. Do you? She asked quietly. Or do you just get used to pretending you're not tired of carrying it? He opened his mouth to reply, then closed it again. His hand had returned to the coffee cup, fingers tapping lightly against the cardboard sleeve. For what it's worth, she added, I think pretending you're not tired is overrated. It just makes you lonely. He looked at her then, really looked, as if recognizing a kindred exhaustion. What about you? He asked. You said things are better on paper. Does that mean you don't get calls like that anymore? She thought of the email about asset allocation, the endless messages about opportunities, the pressure to optimize her wealth. Different calls, she said. Same anxiety, just with nicer stationery. He smiled faintly. Must be nice, though, to not be worried about eviction. She didn't answer right away. It is, she said finally, but it also feels unfair. Like I walked across the same burning floor, and somehow only my shoes caught fire, not my skin. There are people still standing in the flames. He gave her a curious look. That's an intense metaphor for someone helping with finances. She forced a small smile. I told you, I'm adjusting. He leaned back slightly, studying her with those steady, observant eyes. You know, he said, whatever you're adjusting to, I hope you don't adjust so much that you forget what this feels like. What does this mean? She asked. Counting days to Friday, he said, doing mental math between coffee refills. Pretending you're not thinking about numbers while you're trying to think about literally anything else. Her throat tightened. I won't forget, she said quietly. I couldn't if I tried. The cafe lights flickered once as the rain picked up again, wind rattling the door. The moment passed, but its imprint remained. He had almost broken on that phone call. She had seen it. He had patched the crack with humor and deflection. She had done the same 1,000 times. The difference was that now she had the means to change her circumstances. He didn't. Yet, and the word yet started echoing in her mind, growing louder with every heartbeat. As the initial shock ebbed, a different kind of tension settled over the table. Quieter, deeper, the kind that comes when reality shifts and both people have to decide what to do with the new shape of things. So, Ethan said eventually, fingers drumming lightly against his coffee cup, you're a multi-millionaire single mom who walked into a crowded cafe dressed like a grad student and sat at my table. Correct, she said, minus the grad student part. I never got that far. And you let me go on about overdue rent and nonprofit dreams, he added, without saying a word. Guilt flickered across her face. I wasn't trying to hide it to watch you struggle, she said quickly. Whenever people find out now, it's like a switch flips. They stop talking to me and start talking to the idea of me. And you wanted to be just someone with cold coffee and a bad day, he said. Something like that, she replied. He nodded, processing. Okay, he said. Then let me say this. I'm glad I met you before I knew. She blinked. Why? Because if I'd known, he said, I might have talked differently, tried to impress you. Made some dumb joke about investments. I wouldn't have been this version of me. The one who gave up his table and defended a crying kid, she said. The one who told a stranger he's behind on rent, he countered. That's not exactly my networking persona. She smiled a little painfully. For what it's worth, I'm glad I met you before you knew too. Because I would have probably said something stupid like, so, do you come here often, Ms. Hayes, millionaire entrepreneur? She laughed, the tension lifting slightly. Exactly. He grew serious again. So what now, he asked. You dropped the bomb that you're Olivia Hayes, and then you just finish your coffee and leave? No, she said quickly, startling herself with a certainty in her tone. He raised an eyebrow. No, she repeated. Because that would mean all of this, she gestured between them, was just some strange coincidence. Some story to tell later about the day I sat with a kind stranger and lied by omission. And you don't want to be that, he said. I don't know what I want it to be yet, she admitted. But I know it's not nothing. You sat with me when I was invisible. You defended someone when it would have been easier to stay seated. You told me your dream without knowing I could do anything about it. He swallowed. You could do something about it. Yes, she said. I could. The words hung there, heavy with possibility. Ethan, she said carefully, I have resources now that I didn't used to have. Money, yes, but also connections. Knowledge about how to set things up legally, sustainably. If you're serious about that center, and I know you are, I can help you build it. His jaw tightened. You mean fund it, he said. Seed it, she corrected. Partner in it, but not own it. I don't want another company. I want you to have what I never did, a shot at building something without wondering if the lights will be shut off halfway through. He looked away, staring at a spot on the wall as if the paint could give him answers. You realize what you're saying, right? He asked after a moment. You're offering to fix one of the biggest problems in my life because I let you sit at my table and made a fool of myself in front of a guy in a suit. You didn't make a fool of yourself, she said firmly. You made a choice. The kind rich people love to frame in campaigns, but rarely do when the cameras aren't rolling. He was quiet again. This isn't charity, she added. I don't do pity. I've had enough of that for a lifetime. Then what is it? He asked, turning back to her. It's investment, she said simply. In you, in those kids, in the version of myself who could have used a place like you want to build. He let out a breath that sounded like disbelief mixed with something dangerously close to hope. I can't just take your money, he said. I don't want to be some project you feel good about. You won't be, she replied. Projects get abandoned when they stop being exciting. I don't do exciting. I do stubborn. Ask anyone who's tried to outlast me. She leaned forward, eyes locked on his. I'm not offering you a handout. I'm offering you a foundation. You still have to build the walls. You still have to show up, deal with bureaucracy, with kids who test your patience, with late nights and early mornings. All the hard stuff, still yours. I'm just saying you shouldn't have to fight the landlord and the future at the same time. His throat worked as he swallowed. You make it sound reasonable. It is, she said. You know what's not reasonable? Someone like you having a plan that's solid and a heart that big and being stuck in a warehouse at night instead of in front of kids who need you. He laughed once, incredulous and unsteady. You know, a few hours ago, I thought the biggest twist of my day was getting a seat in a crowded cafe. A few hours ago, I thought the biggest twist of mine was finding a table at all, she replied. He met her gaze fully then. What would this look like, he asked, in practical terms? If, and that's a big if, I said yes. You'd send me a copy of all those notes, she said, nodding at the notebook. I'd connect you with my lawyer and an accountant I trust. We'd set up a nonprofit structure with you as director. I'd provide initial funding, enough for at least a full year of operations, maybe more. He inhaled sharply. You'd still need to apply for grants, build a board, find community partners, she continued. But you'd be doing it from solid ground, not from the edge of a cliff. His hand lay flat on the table now, fingers spread as if he needed to feel something steady beneath them. And what do you want? He asked quietly. In return, she thought about it. Really thought. I want kids to have a place to go where they aren't treated like problems waiting to happen, she said. I want your brother to see you doing what you're meant to do. I want to know that all those nights I coded with a baby asleep beside me weren't just for me and my son, but for people like you too. And between us, he asked, what do you want? She met his gaze and didn't look away. I want this, she gestured between them, to stay real. No hero worship. No walking on eggshells. Just two people who've been through hell in different ways, trying to build something that makes it worth it. He exhaled, the sound almost a laugh, almost a sob. You're asking a lot, he said. I know, she replied softly. So am I? He sat there, weighing the offer like it was heavier than the entire world. In some ways, it was. Finally, he said, okay. Her heart skipped. Okay. Okay, he repeated. I don't know how to feel about it yet. I'm probably going to freak out about it later. But, okay, I'll let you help on one condition. Another condition? She asked, a small smile tugging at her lips. He nodded. You don't get to disappear into rich people land when it gets messy. You stay involved. You show up. You remember this table. She nodded once, firmly. Deal. They shook hands across a coffee-stained table in a crowded cafe, sealing an agreement that would change not just their lives, but the lives of people who didn't even know their names yet. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt something they'd almost given up on. Possibility. Months later, the cafe on Willow Street looked almost exactly the same. Same rain-streaked windows. Same chalkboard with daily specials written in slightly crooked letters. Same barista, a little more tired, a little more practiced. But for Olivia and Ethan, everything had changed. Not overnight. Not in some cinematic montage where money fixed everything and smiles came easy. There had been meetings with skeptical city officials, endless forms, permit delays, one landlord who backed out at the last second, and a contractor who tried to overcharge them until Olivia casually mentioned she'd personally written software that could replace half his invoicing system. But there had also been small miracles. A retired teacher who volunteered to design the curriculum. A local artist who painted the front windows for free. A neighborhood council member who helped them find an old community center they could renovate instead of renting some soulless empty office. The after-school center opened on a cloudy Saturday morning with a crooked banner and mismatched folding chairs, and more joy than decoration. Kids came, not in a flood at first, but in a cautious trickle. They came with curiosity, with skepticism, with guarded eyes. They stayed for computers or snacks, the laughter echoing off freshly painted walls. They stayed because, slowly, they realized this place wasn't going to vanish the way other promises had. On the far wall of the main room, a mural stretched almost from floor to ceiling. It showed a small cafe table by a window, 2 cups, 2 chairs, rain streaking down glass. Above it, in bold, hand-painted letters, were the words, "Kindness is the first investment." Ethan stood beneath that mural on opening day, watching a group of kids argue over which music to play through the speakers. The sight made something inside him ache in a good way, like a healed wound that still remembered the pain but no longer bled. Not bad for a Tuesday dream. A familiar voice said behind him. He turned. Olivia stood there, jeans and a soft sweater, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked more like the woman who'd walked into the cafe months ago than the CEO on magazine covers. But now, she stood taller, as if some part of her had finally decided she belonged in the room she walked into. "It's more than not bad," he said. "It's real. Real is better than perfect," she replied. Her son, Noah, darted past him chasing a boy a little older than him, both laughing. In a corner, Ethan's younger brother sat with a small group, explaining something on a whiteboard with the animated gestures of someone who'd finally found the right audience. "He's a natural," Olivia said, nodding toward the board. "Teacher? Coach? Mentor," Ethan said proudly. "He starts community college next semester. Part-time. We worked into the budget so he can keep helping here too." She smiled. "Your mom would be proud." He swallowed. "I hope so." For a moment, they stood side by side, watching the room. It wasn't glossy. It wasn't polished. The chairs didn't match, and the donated rug in the reading corner had a stain that wouldn't quite come out, but it was full of noise and energy and hope and kids who didn't have to go home right after school to empty apartments and quiet fear. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. "The cafe?" "Every time I see that mural," he said. "Every time a kid sits at a table in here and looks less alone than they did when they walked in." "Funny," she said. "I think about it every time someone calls me, an inspiring founder, like they just discovered my existence yesterday." He laughed. "You're still not doing interviews?" "Only the ones that talk more about this place than about my bank account," she said. "If media wants a story, they're going to hear about these kids and this center whether they like it or not." He nodded approvingly. "Weaponizing publicity for good. I like it." A volunteer walked by with a box of donated books. Another followed with a tray of sandwiches. The center hummed with a kind of organized chaos that felt, to both of them, like the sound of their lives finally aligning with their intentions. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to think rich people and people like me were living on different planets." "And now?" she asked. "And now I think we were always on the same one," he replied, "just given different maps. You found a way to redraw yours. Then you helped redraw mine." She looked at him, really looked, and felt again that quiet, steady presence she'd first recognized at that cafe. "You would have found a way eventually," she said. "With or without me." "Maybe," he said, "but it would have taken longer, and fewer kids would have had somewhere to go in the meantime." Silence stretched between them, not empty, but full of everything that had happened since that first shared table. "You know the part that still gets me?" she said. "What?" he asked. "That all of this," she gestured around them, "started because you looked up in a crowded room and decided not to act like everyone else." He shrugged, a little embarrassed. "It was just a seat." "It was more than a seat," she said softly. "It was a message. You deserve space. You have no idea how rarely some people hear that." He was quiet for a moment. "Then I guess I'm glad I didn't keep it to myself," he said. A staff member approached them. "We're about to start the first workshop," she said. "Can you say a few words?" Ethan looked startled. "Me? You're the reason we're all here," the staff member said simply. He glanced at Olivia, who nodded. "Go," she said. "You're good at this. You've always been good at this. You just finally have a room that knows it." He walked to the front of the room, heart pounding. Kids turned, murmurs died down, eyes lifted toward him. He cleared his throat. "Hey," he began, awkward but honest. "Welcome. I'm Ethan. This place exists because someone once gave up half a table in a crowded cafe, and it reminded me that small acts can change big things." He scanned the room, catching sight of a boy in the back whose posture screamed, "I don't believe any of this. I don't know all your stories," he said, "but I know what it feels like to think no one sees you. I know what it's like to think you have to do everything alone. This place is here to prove that wrong." In the back of the room, Olivia watched, pride swelling quietly in her chest. He didn't thank her by name. He didn't mention her money. That was exactly how she wanted it, because he wasn't standing there as the man she rescued. He was standing there as the man he had always been, finally given the room and the resources to become visible. Later, when the days slowed and the kids filtered out, they ended up back where it had all started. Not at the cafe, but at a table in the center's small staff kitchen. 2 cups of coffee, 2 chairs, a different view, but the same feeling. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked suddenly. "Miss what?" she replied. "Being invisible," he said. "Before the headlines, before the pressure." She thought about it. "Sometimes," she said, "but then I remember this. And I think maybe visibility isn't the problem. It's what you do with it." "And what do you think we're doing with it?" he asked. She smiled. "Building more tables," she said. "So nobody has to stand in a crowded room and wonder if they deserve a seat." He lifted his cup in a quiet toast. "To crowded cafes," he said, "and the people who refuse to hoard their chairs." She clinked her cup gently against his. "And to the fact that being rich or poor has nothing to do with the size of your bank account," she added. It's how much space you're willing to make for someone else. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, the work had just begun. And somewhere in a small cafe on Willow Street, a table by the window sat waiting for the next tired stranger who needed a place to rest and the next ordinary act of kindness that might just change everything.